يضلل فأولئك هم الخاسرون. صدق الله العظيم. After narrating the incidents of the people before the specific incident yesterday which we covered of Bal'am bin Ba'ura, as a general statement, the Quran al-Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides us, informs us that sa'a, very evil is. We've heard the word sayyi'ah. Sayyi'ah means a misdeed. So sa'a, coming from the same, sa'a, very evil is mathala, the likeliness, the example of those people, al-qawm, alladhina kadhabu bi-ayatina, those who rejected, belied our ayat. When ayat are mentioned in the Quran al-Kareem, there are two possibilities, and both are meant. One is, ayat literally means the sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is the ayat of the Quran al-Kareem, these ayat, these verses of the Quran that we read. So that also fits in this context. The evil is the example of, or the likeliness of those people who reject the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is truth. Through and through it is only haqq and truth. So to reject that which is the truth means a person is not in a good situation. The second is referring to the cosmological signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the natural signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what a person sees day in, day out, the system of this world, how things work, if you want to call it science as well. This is all from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yesterday we spoke about modernity and the distinction that was drawn between religion versus science, etc. Whereas this was never the case for Muslims. In fact, the initial discoveries in the Muslim world of science, everyone knows about this, that this occurred in the Muslim world. Many discoveries were made in the Muslim world, and we promoted this. In fact, the Quran al-Kareem encourages us that look and ponder and see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more a person sees the design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fine design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how much detail there is to everything, it only further emphasizes and confirms and reconfirms that these things could not have happened by itself. That's all. That's the only consequence. That's the only result a person can come to. That's the only answer that one comes to. That the more detailed something is, that shows that there's someone who put that detail in. So whatever we see around us, what we study, etc., these things only prove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they emphasize the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they only support the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we by no means are averse to calling people towards looking and pondering into the natural science. In fact, the Quran al-Kareem says that look into the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ponder over this. سَاءَ مَثَلَ قَوْمُ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا وَأَنفُسَهُمْ كَانُوا يَظْلِمُونَ. And they were only wronging and rejecting, and they only oppressed their own selves. Meaning the person who belies something which is the truth, something which is beneficial for yourself, then the only one who you are harming, the only one you are hurting is yourself. مَنْ يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَهُوَ الْمُهْتَدِي. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, then indeed that person is the one who is truly guided. Both ways. In both ways, meaning that it's only the hidayah, the guidance of Allah, which is true guidance. Guidance doesn't come from anywhere else. And that true guidance can only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, two things here. One is the only guidance that is truly guidance is that which comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the only one who can bring a person towards that true guidance is also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَنْ يَهْدِ اللَّهُ فَهُوَ الْمُهْتَدِي. وَمَنْ يُضْلِلْ, whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows him to go astray, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ, then they are the true losers. They are the ones who will lose in the akhirah and for ever and ever. That is true loss. That person who loses in the akhirah, that is true loss. In this world, we use the word of gaining, losing. These are all, as far as this world is concerned. A gain in this world is only really a gain if it reflects and materializes and it translates to gain in the hereafter. From a physical perspective, for example, a person gives sadaqah in this world. So in this world, from a materialistic perspective, will you say gain or loss? You'll say loss, right? Money coming out of a person's pocket, money coming out of a person's bank. From a materialistic perspective, from a consumerism perspective, then that is considered a loss. You would call it a loss. But is that really a loss? No. It's the same thing as a person who puts money into something as an investment. You won't call that a loss. So I don't have this $1,000, $10,000 with me anymore, but because this 10,000 means 100,000 and more for me later. In the same way, gain and loss for us is through the eyes of the akhirah. We've repeated this again and again and again, and we will continue to repeat it. Why? Because our deen doesn't change. It's just a matter of a reminder that everything must be seen through the lens of the akhirah. How does this translate into the akhirah? What is the value of this in the akhirah? So yes, in this world, we may put it under loss. In your bank account, it comes as money subtracted, not money which came in, whatnot. But in reality, this is considered to be a gain. Whereas, and the opposite end is also true, that a person through unjustified means, haram means, impermissible ways, they gain money, they take someone's money from avenues which are not allowed, which are impermissible. Then, although in this world, as far as numbers and material is considered, it may add up and it may look as a gain, but in reality that is a loss. So when a person looks through the lens of the akhirah, then the result may be very different than the one who only merely looks through the lens of this dunya. Same thing when it comes to other difficulties a person goes through. That a person may be suffering certain diseases. Someone may be suffering financial issues. Someone may be suffering through mental difficulties, social anxieties, whatever it may be. But the hadith of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, مَا مِن شَوْكَةٍ يُشَاكُ الْمُسْلِمِ إِلَّا وَلَهُ فِيهِ أَجْرٌ. That even a small prick, something that pricks a person, any difficulty which comes upon a person, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives ajr and reward to a person for that. The difficulty of a person is come to hadith for example, making wudu on a cold morning. And despite that, he makes wudu and he goes for salah. إِسْبَاغُ الْوُضُوء عَلَى الْمَكَارِهِ. There's much reward for that. These are all just examples where apparently it looks like difficulty. Someone may translate it as loss. Losing a child. Losing a child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that the one who loses a child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a home for them in the akhirah called Baytul Hamd. So in this world, yes, these are losses, and we're not saying that you become emotionless. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself, upon the loss of his grandchild, he was crying. Someone asked, Ya Rasulullah, you also cry? He said, of course. The one who has rahmah, Allah ta'ala put rahmah in their heart, obviously they will cry. So, feeling things in this world, having a heart, and that a person cries over difficult, that's all human. We're not denying that. But at the end of the day, what is the way the believer looks at this? He doesn't merely restrict it to this world. That I merely lost a child and I will never see a child. No. Rather, loss of a child, in the akhirah, there's still a reward for me. When we look through this lens, the lens of the akhirah, then a person, he does not fall into these type of social anxieties. The way some people, how they have outbursts and they are not able to, as you say, make sense of everything that goes around them. Why? Because when you remove one aspect of an equation and you just look at only the other aspect of it, then it doesn't add up. But when you look at the whole, right? For example, you have a beautiful painting. Now in that painting there are different colors. If a person zooms into only just one spot, then he may look at this as this is just one smudge, brown, just a smudge of black, it's just a smudge. There's no meaning to it, right? Because he just looks into that one. He just focuses on that one spot. But when he takes the entire picture together, the entire mosaic he looks at as one, then it makes sense to him, that how everything fits in, how it all comes together. The same is a person who discounts the akhirah. Removing the akhirah from the entire picture, then a person, how could this be happening? How can, natural disaster, how this occurred? Why would Allah Ta'ala? Why? Because a person removed the lens of the akhirah, or he removed the aspect of the akhirah. And the same thing, another example, if you look at something through a particular film, for example, if you have a red film, and if you look at everything through that, everything looks red. If you switch it to yellow, then it all looks yellow. So a person who only looks through the film of the dunya, then it all looks like, it may not make sense to him. Things may not add up the way how he wants it to be. But when you bring akhirah into it, when you look at through the lens of the akhirah, then a person may even say that hundreds of my lives may be sacrificed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As it comes in hadith, a shaheed when he passes, the martyr, at the day of judgment, when he comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his only wish is, Ya Allah, give me life again, so again I can struggle, again I can be sacrificed in your life. Because of the reward he's seeing there. We make dua that Allah Ta'ala gives us understanding of the Quran Kareem and Sunnah.